Hey everyone, it's Ricardo, and here is the Popping Collars lineup for the month of September 2020. Betsy, Greg, Liz, and I discuss workplace pop culture on Popping Collars, celebrating those fictional characters who do their jobs well. Take 2 sees the return of our first ever podcast guest, Chris Arnold, coming back to talk about our first ever podcast topic, Orange is the New Black. Betsy and Greg review My Left Foot starring Daniel Day-Lewis on Going on 30. Finally, Greg and special guest Shayna Watson explore what many people are saying is the best episode of Star Trek ever, The City on the Edge of Forever, on this month's Sacred 6. Thanks for listening, and keep those collars popped.
Shayna, where would you go in your time machine?
To the beginning.
That's such a great answer. I have nothing that I could say to improve on that, other than I hope that you have like a spacesuit.
Hopefully I'll land within the first 7 days where,
exactly, yeah.
Where
just make it to day 6 at least if you can. This is the Sacred 6. Okay, welcome to the Sacred 6. Sometimes an item in pop culture is just too big for one podcast episode, and that's where this show steps in. I'm your host, Greg Knight. My special guest for this series is Shayna Watson. Shayna, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Awesome. We continue to boldly go through 6 episodes of Star Trek, and this month we find ourselves at Season 1, Episode 29, City on the Edge of Forever. Shayna, you're going to hate me, but I did the 1-minute plot synopsis last time, so you have to do the 1-minute plot synopsis this time for a story that is crazy.
It is crazy.
Okay, 1 minute on the clock. On your mark, get set, go.
I'll do it in 20 seconds. They time travel. That's it. Yeah, Bones loses his marbles and runs through a time-traveling machine.
Oh, man.
And Kirk and Spock go to rescue him. The end.
It's a Doctor Who episode. If you've seen Doctor Who, you've seen this episode, for God's sake. It's crazy. Like we talked about, in the end of the last episode, I said, like, this is considered one of the best episodes of the show. Like, wow, really? Like, I was watching it thinking, really? What is the moment that stood out for you most in this episode?
First, I need to just say, I don't know why this is like...
Yeah, I'm totally with you.
I'm just... So what stood out to me the most was the period of time that they time traveled back to.
30s, I think. It's like, because they were in bread lines. So I think it was like Depression era.
Yeah, so it was just this strange time to go back to, and their staging where they were when they went back in time was at emissions. Mm-hmm. They were receiving the grace and the support and the help through a missional program where Captain Kirk falls in love with Joan Collins, who is this beautiful shelter coordinator that gives everyone coffee and really great pastoral support and care. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I just thought it was just an interesting era to travel to.
Yeah, I had this moment where there was that scene where she stands up, like when the Kirk and Spock get their soup and they're sitting with the other guys in the soup kitchen and stuff. And one of the guys is like, okay, well, now you have to earn your supper. And she like goes up on stage, and I'm thinking like, what's she going to do? Is she going to like preach? Like what's going to happen here? Because it totally set up that she was like going to start talking about Jesus or something. Yes. And she starts talking about space, and you're like, Okay.
So random. She was like, and one day, man is going to go to the moon and outer space. If you drink your coffee, you could be whatever you want to be in life and touch stars. Like,
it was super random. I was like, no, hon, you need to be talking about Jesus. You need to be talking about like saving people's souls. Like this is clearly the Salvation Army. Like, what's going on? Talking about space. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird to me. I'm really struggling with that episode.
My moment, because I'm like you, this episode, I'm not quite sure why it gets the love that it does online. But my favorite moment from this episode was the end, because it was the end of the episode. But also, it was the end because the machine that they go through in order to go back into the past, like at the end of the episode, it invites them to go back again.
What happened, sir? You only left a moment ago.
We were successful.
Time has resumed its shape. All is as it was before. Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway.
Captain, the Enterprise is up there. They're asking if we want to beam up.
Let's get the hell out of here.
And Kirk has that moment where he's like, wait, I can go back. I can live the reality with Joan Collins that, you know, I really wanted to. And you start to realize that, like, this idea of time travel, this idea of like going back, it's a trap. And it's always a trap. It will never not be a trap. This idea of like, oh, I can go back and do whatever, like that's a trap. That's a trapped way of thinking. You're going forward. Like that's how time works. That's how, like, keep going forward.
It's so true. And then echoing that, and that's probably why it was so well received, because I'm considering the conversations that might have been taking place when Star Trek was written, you know, traveling and going to the moon and going to outer space. And, you know, can we travel in time? What does all of that metaphysical aspect of transportation look like? And if we could travel back in time, what would you change? Mm-hmm. And the fact that Captain Kirk had to sacrifice. I mean, he had to let Joan Collins, I forgot her name, her character, he had to let her die in order to save the future. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there were two paths for her. Either she would die tragically, or the other part was that she would end up having a conversation with the president or something, like, you know, she had like this really bright future. And so, you know, Spock is trying to put this machine together. And so Kirk is saying, you know, well, Spock, how can this be? How could she be both, you know, this brilliant woman that moves forward progressively, or either she meets a tragic end? And Spock was like, you know, I can't tell you, but all I can tell you is that these are two potential outcomes. I don't know how either one will happen. Mm-hmm. So to kind of be left in that mystery. And, you know, with sci-fi and these pop culture conversations, there are always like these rules, you know, if you go back in time, don't touch or change anything. Right. You know, you can't resurrect the dead. You can't, you know, like there are these principles that you just cannot operate outside of, because if you do, you will alter present reality or future realities. Mm-hmm. Because it has that type of butterfly ripple effect. So it was really complex. And I would say that was the piece of letting her die, the difficult decision of letting someone that you care about die in order to secure the future of many. Like that's a little insane to me. Because, you know, I mean, there's Starfleet. They're from the Enterprise. That's what they do. They come through. They fix things. They got answers. Spock, he's non-emotional and he's logical, and they have answers. But this time, they were all stuck. Yeah. And when Bones came through, he was like, Jim, do you realize what you just did? And Spock said, he knows. Mm-hmm.
So where does this episode intersect with where we are today?
It brings to mind so many questions for me. Like, if you could do it all again. And I know when I was a chaplain, you know, that was a huge question that I would ask of some of my patients who were at end of life. You know, if you could do it all again, what are some of the things you would change? Some would say I would try to be a better person, or I would live life without prejudice, because, being so filled with hate has gotten me nowhere. The other piece is, if you knew that something was going to happen to someone, would you tell them, or how would you respond to that? If it was in your control or in your power to save them, would you, if you knew that there will be all these other consequences? So I have more questions to that than I actually see this episode being grounded in our present reality, because the episode itself, it was just filled with so many possibilities and so many outcomes. I mean, to me, it was mostly like ethical questions. Like, what would you do if it was in your power to, to save one versus the many, or the many versus the one?
Yeah. I think that's what kind of hit me while you were talking just then. Was the only thing that I could think of is, well, there were two things actually. One is, that importance of like one life. I feel like sometimes we say that as lip service, like, well, as long as one person, changes or something like that, but not like that actually is meaningful. If one person can be changed, like, I mean, that's biblical, right? When Abraham's arguing before God and he's like, well, what if I can save 100 people? Or what if I can save 10 people? Like, God values the importance of one life in that moment. When you were talking, what I thought of was nostalgia, like the way nostalgia works today and how people appeal to it as a solution. And like we said earlier, it's a trap. Like, it's not, nostalgia isn't a solution. Making whatever great again isn't a solution. Like, that's a trap, like that's just going to get you stuck in something that's not real.
But you're right. I mean, we romanticize the past so much. Like, remember when we used to, like, and you were all poor, like, in order to get to that beautiful part that we are appreciating, like, folks minimize or they forget how much, work or how much sacrifice it actually took to get there. And it's like, do you really want to do that again? Yeah. And I do think, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and I didn't think about it until you said it. It was like, falling in love with the nostalgia, falling in love with the past, but not really grasping what we're asking for, what we're trying to return to, because it's not just the individual fantasy, but it's like, think about everything else surrounding that. I mean, do we want to return to slavery? Do we want to return? You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, guys. I'm like, hello, brown girl over here. We do not want to go back to 1834. Thank you very much.
Totally. Who's your MVP for this? This was a tough one.
The traveling door was the MVP.
It was the perfect trap. The traveling door.
I know. And then it had the nerve to ask them if they wanted to go back through. Like, for like something. Kirk was like, no. Kirk out. Beat me up, Scotty. We are out of this.
You just lived through one of the most painful moments of your life. You want to go back? You want to do it again?
Do it again.
I'm going to go with Spock for this one because here's the note that I wrote. His ability to create like this time portal or whatever with spare parts, it warmed my Sunday school teacher heart. Because that's... I'm constantly on a Sunday school hall gluing popsicle sticks together, thinking like, "What am I doing? What is this?"
And red construction paper, making little rings. The kids love it.
I love it, man. Spock putting together like this whole giant thing just to like get one picture from the future. I love it.
I know. That was amazing. No, he had it like all hooked up in his 1930s like hostel room,
I loved his cap too. Maybe Spock's cap. That could be the MVP for me. Spock's little toque that he had to cover his ears. That thing was great.
Yeah, it was like a little skull cap. It was so cute. And they had the plaid shirts on and were stuffing them in their pants. I was like, oh, don't tuck your shirt in.
And honestly, a better solution than Star Trek IV when he wore the bandana around his head. Like, I thought the toque worked better than the bandana to cover his ears.
MVP for that. That's awesome.
That is another adventure in the Captain's Log. We are halfway through our 6-episode journey. Next up, we'll be heading to Season 3, Episode 7, Day of the Dove, featuring the return of the Klingons. See you then.
Star trekking across the universe.
On the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk.
Star trekking across the universe.